Imagine it's the third day without rain. The sun has been beating down mercilessly since early morning. Your garden is literally parching for water. You stand there with the hose just like every evening, and you know exactly. Tomorrow the same game awaits you, and the day after again. Week after week, year after year, your shoulder already hurts from holding the hose. Meanwhile, the water meter keeps spinning relentlessly. The bill at the end of the month will be higher once again. And yet, despite all that water, some of your plants look weak. The tomatoes are hanging limp. The cucumbers just won't grow right. The lettuce is bolting prematurely. You seriously wonder what you're doing wrong. But what if I told you that people already knew a system 2,000 years ago that made this daily tedious work completely unnecessary? A system that regulates itself entirely, saves massive amounts of water, makes plants stronger, and works practically for 2 decades without you having to lift a finger. Not every few days, not even every week. A system that just runs, quietly, reliably, and efficiently. We have simply forgotten this knowledge. Not because it doesn't work, but because modern agriculture led us to believe that only complex, expensive systems are the true solution. Because we were talked into believing we need high technology, electronics, and automation. Yet the answer lies right beneath the earth, quiet, simple, and inconspicuous. An answer our ancestors knew exactly, which they passed down through generations, and which worked when there were no power grids, no garden hoses, and no irrigation systems. If you think that sounds way too simple now, then stay right here. Because in the next few minutes, you will understand why this forgotten principle can not only revolutionize your garden, but also your entire approach to self-sufficiency and independence. You will learn how a system works that lets time work for you instead of you working for time. And if that is important to you, then subscribe to this channel now, because this is exactly what we're about. Practical, proven, and independent. Also hit the thumbs up so more people can find this knowledge again, and stay tuned until the end, because that's where it all comes together. I'll show you concretely how you can start with it this very week. We live in a time when water scarcity is no longer an abstract future scenario. Drought summers are becoming the rule. In the summer of 2003, Europe suffered under a heat wave that cost tens of thousands of lives. In the summer of 2018, entire harvests withered. In 2022, Germany broke records for dryness. Municipalities are imposing watering bans. The groundwater levels are sinking year after year. Wells are drying up. Rivers carry so little water that shipping has to be stopped. At the same time, food prices are rising. Inflation is eating through all areas of our lives. Supply chains are becoming more fragile. We are experiencing shortages of things we thought were a given. The question is no longer whether we should think about self-sufficiency, but how we do it right. How we create systems that don't depend on our permanent attention. Systems that don't collapse if we're gone for 2 weeks or if the power fails. How we create gardens that don't make more work, but less and simultaneously produce more. Our ancestors had these systems. They had to have them because they had no electric pumps, no irrigation systems, and no time for hour-long watering marathons. They worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset. They couldn't afford to walk through the garden every evening. They needed solutions that worked while they slept, and they found them. They had principles that worked with nature, not against it. Let me tell you a story. In 2011, an agricultural technician traveled to Rajasthan in India. The region suffered from extreme drought. Modern irrigation systems were far too expensive for small farmers. Solar pumps were unaffordable. The harvest failed. Families hungered. Then in a remote village, he discovered something strange. An old man over 90 years old had a garden that was lush and green while everything around it was parched. No pump, no hose, no visible water source nearby. The technician asked for the secret. The old man smiled and showed him clay vessels buried among the plants. A system that his grandfather had shown him. A system that his grandfather, in turn, had shown him. A chain of knowledge reaching back centuries. The system we're talking about today has a name many have never heard. Ollas. The word comes from Spanish and means simply pot or jug, but behind it lies a technology so elegant it seems almost magical. An olla is an unglazed clay vessel buried in the ground. You fill it with water and then something amazing happens. The porous clay releases the water slowly, continuously, and exactly where it's needed, namely directly to the roots of the surrounding plants. No evaporation at the surface. On hot summer days when you water with the hose, up to 60% of the water evaporates before it even reaches the roots. 60%. Imagine carrying bucket after bucket of water, and more than half of it just vanishes into thin air. No water loss through wind, no flooded beds where the water just runs off without soaking in, no dried out corners because the water stream didn't reach them. The system regulates itself because capillary forces only pull as much water into the soil as it can absorb. When the soil is moist, it pulls less. When it becomes dry, it pulls more. The plants always get exactly what they need. Not too much, which would cause root rot, and not too little, which favors stress and diseases. Just right. Archaeologists have found evidence that this system was used in China as early as 4,000 years ago. In the dry provinces, where the monsoon often failed, farmers dug clay vessels into their fields. In North Africa, in the desert fringe areas south of the Sahara, Berber tribes used them to create oases, small green islands in a world of sand. In the Middle East, in the ancient cultures of Mesopotamia, we find clay shards pointing to the same system. In the arid regions of South America, among the Pueblo peoples in what is now New Mexico and Arizona, people grew corn, beans, and squash with them, in areas where it only rains once a year. Why did we forget it? Because industrial agriculture focuses on mass, speed, and control. After the Second World War, agriculture changed radically. Large machines, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, monocultures. Everything was standardized, mechanized, and scaled. A farmer who used to manage 10 hectares was suddenly supposed to manage 100. Efficiency no longer meant working with nature, but dominating it. Water became a commodity that could be distributed at will. Deep wells were drilled, groundwater pumped, huge irrigation systems installed. The old methods were considered backward and primitive. Who wanted to work with clay pots when there were tractors and sprinklers? But here's the truth. These systems only work as long as everything else works, as long as the electricity flows, as long as the parts are available, as long as the money is there. Corporations want to sell us drip hoses, timers, and complex irrigation systems that have to be replaced every few years because the simple, the old, the proven doesn't seem sexy enough, because you can't make money with it. You buy an olla once and it works for 20 years. That's not a good business model for a corporation, but an excellent one for you. Exactly this simplicity is the strength. In a complex, fragile world, simplicity is not weakness, but superiority. Let me explain the principle to you step by step. The first principle is the porosity of the material. Unglazed clay has millions of microscopic pores. If you were to look at such a vessel under a microscope, it would look like a sponge. These pores are created during the firing process when water evaporates and leaves behind tiny channels. Water in the vessel diffuses slowly outward through these pores. In the earth, the water follows a pressure gradient, the osmotic pressure. When the soil is dry, a suction is created. The system is self-regulating, without electronics and without sensors. Nature itself is the regulator, a perfect, flawless regulator. The second principle is deep watering. When you water from above, much of the water evaporates. The surface dries off quickly, and the plants develop shallow root systems because they have learned that water is only available at the top. Shallow roots mean weak plants. The olla, on the other hand, sits 15 to 20 cm underground. The water reaches the root zone directly. The plants feel the moisture and send their roots there. They develop deep, strong systems. Tomato plants with ollas can develop roots that reach 60 centimeters deep. You're not breeding dependent, weak plants, but survival artists. The third principle is water conservation. Studies by universities in Colorado and Arizona have shown that olla systems use up to 70% less water than traditional methods. 70%. That is a quantum leap. If you normally need 1,000 liters of water, with ollas it's only 300. In one summer you save thousands of liters. That's the difference between a green garden and a parched plot of land, especially when water is scarce or expensive. In Burkina Faso, yields increased by 200% through ollas simply because the existing water was used more efficiently. The fourth principle is longevity. A well-fired clay vessel can stay in the ground for 20 years and longer. No spare parts, no electricity costs, no maintenance. No hose that bursts, no pump that gives up the ghost. An olla costs a one-time fee of 20 to 40 euros. Over 20 years, that's at most 2 euros per year. Compare that with an automatic system that costs hundreds of euros and constantly needs repairs. And then there's your time. You only need to refill every few days. A large olla can last a week or longer. You can go on vacation without panicking about your plants. That is true freedom. The fifth principle is flexibility. Ollas work in raised beds, open field gardens, greenhouses, and even in pots on the balcony. Every plant benefits. A small olla waters an area of 50 centimeters in diameter, a large one up to 1.5 meters. You can plan strategically and place the ollas where they are needed most. You are the designer and not dependent on a manufacturer. How do you build such a system? It's easier than you think. You need unglazed clay pots. Important, glaze makes the clay waterproof, which we don't want here. A simple test. Fill the pot with water and wait an hour. If a moisture ring forms on the outside, the clay is porous enough. You can buy ready-made ollas or build them yourself. For building them yourself, you take 2 terracotta pots of the same size. Plug the drainage hole of one with waterproof glue. Then glue both pots together at the edges so that a closed vessel is formed. The upper hole remains open for filling. Cost, under 10 euros. Regarding installation, dig a hole so that the olla is almost completely submerged. Only the rim should stick out 2 to 3 centimeters so that no soil falls in. Fill the hole halfway with soil, insert the olla, and press the soil down firmly all around. The direct contact between clay and soil is crucial for water transfer. Then fill the olla completely with water. At the beginning, the water level drops quickly because the clay has to soak first. After a few days, the system stabilizes. Close the opening with a lid or stone to avoid evaporation and mosquitoes. Plant your tomatoes, lettuces, or squashes all around. You will notice that the plants look more vital. The leaves are greener, growth is more even. The fruits become juicier because there are no stress situations due to lack of water. And you gain time, about 72 hours per season, that you used to spend watering. The sixth principle is soil health. Watering from above seals the surface and forms crusts. With ollas, the surface remains dry. This has a huge advantage. Weeds germinate less well because the top layer is dry. Fewer weeds mean less work. At the same time, the soil remains moist and alive deep down. Earthworms and microorganisms thrive. A healthy soil means strong plants that are less susceptible to pests. Stressed plants attract pests. Healthy plants have their own defense mechanisms. Why is this system not used everywhere? Because it makes you independent. There is no electricity bill, no spare parts, and no maintenance contracts. Simplicity doesn't market well. Industry wants to sell us dependence. But what happens during a blackout or when spare parts are no longer available? The olla has no weak point except the clay itself. That is true resilience. Our grandparents had such self-sufficient systems. We forgot them because comfort blinded us. But the crises of recent years show us that we need this knowledge again. Remember Thomas from Brandenburg? He had an expensive automatic system that kept breaking and failed in the extreme summer. With ollas for 100 euros, he had the best harvest of his life. He saved money, time, and nerves. This is not an isolated case. It is the decision to go back in order to move forward. Ollas are extremely versatile. In raised beds, one olla in the middle is often enough. For young fruit trees, they are ideal for promoting a deep root system. In the greenhouse, they lower humidity and thus the risk of fungal diseases. Even on the balcony, they save your plants during vacation. You can combine them perfectly with rainwater to use every drop with maximum efficiency. A seventh principle is temperature regulation. The water from the olla is at ground temperature. This protects the roots from the shock of ice-cold or sun-warmed tap water. The olla is more than an irrigation system. It is a symbol for a way of life that relies on cooperation with nature. If you build a garden with ollas, you learn how true self-sufficiency works. You gain security, freedom, and knowledge. The world is becoming more unpredictable, But the answers don't have to be complicated. Sometimes the best answer is the one that was always there. Wisdom means recognizing what works, no matter how old it is. The eighth principle is redundancy. Each olla works for itself. If one fails, the others keep working. That is decentralized security. You have a choice now. You can continue to stand in the garden every evening with the hose, or you can act. Start small, with one olla, and see for yourself what happens. You will feel how your relationship with the garden changes, from duty to joy. If this knowledge has opened your eyes, then become part of our community. If this story has changed your view on the supposedly simple things in the garden, then subscribe to this channel now. We are digging up history that they tried to bury. Let's plant the future together. The next treasure of knowledge will soon be revealed. Hit the thumbs up and stay on the path to true independence.